Okay, welcome everyone to the Here Brotherhood podcast. I'm really thrilled and honored to have Carl Richards on. Carl is best known, I would say, for being a New York Times columnist for over a decade. Is that right?
Yeah, it was
This
just right on the nose, I think, a decade. Yeah.
Nice. And my background is in graphic design.
Yeah.
As a designer, like seeing the way that you distill these ideas around money, these insights around finance in these very simple Sharpie sketches is just magical to me. Like I love that. So it's
Thank
obviously resonated with a lot of people. You're a certified financial planner. Carl's an international speaker, author, podcaster, the Behavior Gap Radio, and more recently 50 Fires, which I have found to be really fascinating. And I've loved hearing those conversations, particularly Debbie Millman. She was, she's kind of a celebrity in the design and business world. And so I definitely resonated with that one. I've listened to her many times. And I love the conversation with Krista Tippett from the On Being podcast, which obviously has a lot of connections with the kind of work that we're doing now with the Here Brotherhood around finding centeredness, spirituality, groundedness, connection, all those kinds of things. And so I just wanted to start off by saying thank you for the work you're doing and for those conversations, because they've been really impactful for me.
Thanks, Mike. That's really kind of you. And it's fun to hear people. This will be a fun conversation because those are two of my all-time favorite. Like that was a dream, to be honest. The Krista Tippett particularly, but Debbie too.
Yeah,
I can't tell you the number of what they used to call them NPR driveway moments. Where I get home and couldn't get out of the car until I was done listening to the Krista Tippett sort of episodes.
Yes,
so it was a dream. I kept saying like, "Wow, this is so crazy." She's in my ears. So yeah, those were fun. And they didn't disappoint from my perspective in terms of the value of the conversation. So thank you.
No, and I will just emphasize the authenticity that you hold in those conversations is incredible. And I love that being a certified financial planner, your conversations are not about typically the principles and strategies and economic conditions. And I would actually love to kind of start there. Like, why isn't it so much focused on that? And why do you go more into the relationship and the psychology components?
Yeah, it's interesting. The short answer is because I'm compelled to. I don't really have a choice. There was no big strategy decision. I got into the financial planning industry by accident when I was at the University of Utah as an undergrad, and I for the first couple of years I was always thought it was just a temporary thing, because what I thought I wanted to do was sort of the Stephen Covey organizational behavior thing, and the reason I thought I wanted to do that is because I cared deeply about people, and I couldn't have put language around this back then. This is all with the benefit of hindsight, but so I care. Like most specifically, I care about people who are up to something. You know what I mean? Like, and I can almost now find them in a room of 100 people. I can find the people with a little light in their eyes, and it makes me like somebody who has like they have a thing. They're excited. They're slightly mischievous, and so I cared deeply about that. And I thought money's the last thing I care about. And then I slowly started to realize like money actually was the most interesting portal into that discussion, right? And so now money is a very intentional tool to use as a framework for a conversation about what matters. And all my financial planning background, like I think I can go toe to toe with anybody, and like investment management and portfolio design and all those things. Like that stuff's really important, but I don't care about it at all, except for like, okay, great. Why are you doing it in the first place?
Yeah.
Like even down to spending, like, I don't care which budgeting, but why are you spending the way you're spending? Or why are you saving the way you're saving? Why are you waiting? Like, why aren't you spending more? Like those are the questions that are super interesting to me. So that's why I'm having those conversations, and I've been having those for a long time. It's just only recently have we all sort of given ourselves permission to start, and I think maybe 2007 and 8 opened the door.
Mm-hmm.
The pandemic certainly opened the door. We started having discussions around what really matters. Who do you trust? Do I want to live in this place? Right? Like in the pandemic,
Right.
you got permission to be like, do I want to live here? Do I want to work here? And so I think there's been a crisis of meaning for a long time, but it's only recently that we've realized that we can talk about it. And I think money's a very interesting, unfortunately, money's a very interesting portal into those conversations.
Okay. Why did you say unfortunately? That intrigued me.
Yeah, it's a bummer that money is at the center of your dreams, right? And that money's at the center of your fears, and it's a bummer because it's just the economic system we happen to live in.
Yeah.
Like it's unfortunate that if you think like, I want to go do this thing, one of the very first questions you ask your son who says, I have a dream, I want to go to this university, one of the very first things you think about is like, oh, can we afford that? That's a bummer, right? But it's reality, and because it's reality, we may as well accept it and work with it as a tool to get more clear about what we really care about.
Wow. Yeah. No, I love that. Thank you for explaining that a little further.
Yeah.
I love the question that you ask your guests, which is, what is your earliest memory with money? And this is very connected to a lot of the work that we do with in our retreat settings too. We kind of go back into some of those belief systems that we adopted from early development, where a lot of our fundamental belief systems are created and formed, and just developmentally, we're only capable of understanding so much of the world and what's happening. But there are these deep-rooted belief systems that happen, and they just become a part of our subconscious, right? Like our operating system. And I haven't really explored with very many people the topic of money and that kind of subconscious, or maybe now conscious, relationship with it or feeling around it. And so I just think this is a fascinating question. So I'm just going to throw it back at you. What is your earliest memory with money?
Yeah. I mean, first, just a comment. You're not alone in not exploring it. Like almost no one has. I was just in the Bay Area giving a talk there was probably 400 people in the room, and most of them, in their 40s or 50s, and many of them with their spouses. And I asked the question there, like, how many of you, and I said, hey, it's relatively rhetorical, probably don't raise your hands, but how many of you could answer on behalf of your spouse what their earliest memory of money? And I'm sure the answers were, maybe there was one or two. Like we just haven't, which is just so fascinating given the role that it plays in our lives. So fascinating to me. And if you listen to the 50 Fires episode with my wife, it's really clear we hadn't had that discussion, because I was telling a story about her experience with money growing up. I've been telling a story we've been married 30 years. And at this point, it was probably 3 years ago. So we'd been married, let's just call it 27 years. And I had her on and I asked her, and I had been telling this story about what I believed, and I'd been telling it all over the world in speaking engagements everywhere. And I told her that, and she said, I know you've been telling that story and it's wrong. Like that was not, and I was like, I've been telling it all over the world. She goes, I know, and it's wrong. And she then told me, and I was like, man, for 27 years I've been, and 10 of those I played the guy who talked about money in newspaper. You know what I mean? So anyway, it's important. But to your question, I have thought a lot about this because you're not the first person to ask me. And it's really interesting. I don't have a specific, I'm just thinking really carefully because for some reason I'm thinking about folding newspapers on the front porch. I never had a paper route. So I don't know. I don't have a specific memory, but I have a specific memory of a feeling of kind of unspoken tension in the air. right? Like just a low grade, sort of like just below the surface. So it wasn't acute enough. I mean, occasionally it spiked to being acute. My parents were divorced when I was 8. That meant that we moved from Park City to, my mom moved to Salt Lake, and I went with her, and we were in a neighborhood that she worked really hard to keep us in, and was hard work to keep us be able to afford that neighborhood we were in. And I just remember there being an acute tension in the air, which I've since found is not unusual, because none of us talked about it. So I do remember that, but he just didn't talk about it. It just never. So I remember that, and I kind of remember it being stressful but unspoken. That's probably my earliest memory of money, is this force, and I would have never made sense of that then. But how did I know? That's a question I ask a lot on the oh, how did I know? It's only with the benefit of hindsight now that I remember just being. I have felt unsafe for a really long time. Like there's a lion in every bush. And I think a lot of your audience might relate to that. I think there's a uniquely, and I'm sure women feel this too, but I can't speak to that experience. What I can speak to is the number of men who've said to me, like, hyper alert, hyper aware. Like when I drive, I know every rear view mirror, what's going on all the time. And some of that's, I can point to a couple of very specific instances where that's kept me or my family alive.
Yeah.
But I'm talking like 2 or 3. And there's been millions, like maybe billions of cycles spent on the idea that there's a lion in every bush. And so I remember that not being particularly safe because nothing was ever spoken. There was no guardrails. It was just lack of safety. So that's probably my earliest memory of money.
Wow. Yeah, no, and that makes perfect sense then why the hypervigilance comes up now. Would that describe a little bit of your relationship with money now? Is there sort of a hypervigilance with that, in managing that, and even becoming a financial planner and doing the work that you do? Was that around seeking a sense of security or safety?
I'm always really hesitant to look back and make up stories. So I try to be careful about it. But as I look back, that makes a lot of sense to me. But it wasn't part of a conscious effort. But up until 2016 or 17, we moved to New Zealand in 2016. And it was only then that I realized how broken I was in terms of that relationship of feeling a sense of safety, which is uniquely tied to economic safety in our culture.
Yeah.
And it took we went to New Zealand for a year. We ended up staying for 4. And part of the reason was within a couple of months, realized I was just broken. And so now that relationship finally, and I would really say that's from like maybe 2018. So we're only talking like 7 or 8 years. Finally, I feel, and I had a really great conversation maybe last year with a therapist who I was telling about the safety thing. She said, "How often do you feel safe?" I was like, "Never." And she was like, "Will you pay attention?" And she had me pay attention. She was like, 3 times a day, I just want you to ask, like, do I feel safe, and am I safe? And that was a breakthrough for me, because every time I asked, I was like, I am. Well, I do. And I finally realized that was a narrative that needed to be rewired. But the financial piece of it was largely rewired through a series of experiences in and out of New Zealand, where I finally realized, like, hey, it turns out there's not a lion in every bush. And so now, and I know this is long-winded, but the one last piece, that this is really important because, and I'm sure there's just a lot of people listening that would relate to the idea that, like, you have some wiring that genetically kept our species alive. And I often have felt like I was born in the wrong time, like I should have been running around chasing animals out in the woods. But that wiring is no longer, it was adaptive, and it's still somewhat adaptive in some areas of our lives, but it's mostly maladaptive now.
Yeah.
And like that wiring still showed up for me, even up until the last couple of years, where I'd walk to the mailbox and I'd feel gripped walking to the mailbox. And I didn't even know that it was I just would feel gripped. And we've always lived someplace where you had to walk, like not far, like 100 yards or something to a mailbox. And then I noticed one day that whenever there was something from the IRS or the Utah Tax Authority, I would feel particular, and I would tear it open, like holding my breath, tear it open. And I didn't do that with any of the other mail.
Yep.
And I have no reason to be worried about it. Like none. I have no problems. I'm very conservative in my tax paying, all the things. And I was like, man, that's so interesting. And I went to lunch, or I went to breakfast with my dad on Father's Day, who I don't see that often. And I was telling him about that. And I was like, I don't know why that is. And he's like, what do you mean you don't know why? And I was like, no, I don't know why. He's like, what? You don't know why? I was like, what are you talking about? And he told me a story about his experience making a mistake with his taxes that led to a big, huge problem. He's like, you don't know that story? And I was like, man, I vaguely remember some tension around it, but I don't know. And so now what's happened, this is the point of all this, is like, if I can notice that pattern, it's literally grooved in my brain, right? Actually grooved in my brain.
Right.
I can start to regroove it. I don't change the stimulus. There's still going to be a letter in the mailbox every once in a while there was one yesterday. It was a change of address request. There was a couple weeks after that experience with my dad, there was a refund that I'd forgotten about from the state of Utah. And I was like, oh, this is positive.
Right.
So I'm not going to change the stimulus, but I can work to change the response.
Yeah.
And so I tend to now turn to that hypervigilant version of myself around money and say, hey, thank you. Like, thanks for being here. You kept me alive. Like you're real. But I'm just opening a letter. Like it's a stand down, you know what I mean? Like it's okay. So that's been a very conscious process because it used to be just instant hijack, and that hijack would result in arguments or impatience or even some anger around people who had no idea, who were just like, what? You just went to the mailbox, bro. Like, So anyway, it's been really helpful.
Yeah. I think that's so relatable, to get that letter from the IRS and just immediately feel a little bit of the sweaty palms or the, that fight or flight triggers, because we go, I think biologically we're all sort of biased towards the negative in order to protect ourselves. Right.
Sure.
And so when it turns out to be the positive thing, great, but that's not where we sort of default. We default towards I need to keep my guard up here, or I need to protect, right? Or this might be bad news, because it's better to assume that it's bad than it's good, just from a survival perspective, right? Because at least we're going to be ready. But the stimulus is not a threat, and that's the point that I think is funny to us, which you already spoke to. We have these kind of maladaptive instincts to certain stimuli, and finance is a really fascinating one to me, because it's usually, for most of us, not necessarily a matter of life or death, but there is a correlation with our well-being and finance, kind of like what you brought up at the beginning, which is sort of this unfortunate link. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on, especially as men, there are a lot of stories, there are a lot of stories, I think, that are pretty prevalent in our culture around men and money. And I think you would probably just have some unique insights on this, and would love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, man, it's there's so many, and I've got to be protective against the ranty version of me that this is such a hot topic in my mind. And maybe this story would help. I remember in 2000, I can't remember when we moved there, but in 2008, 7, 8, 9, we were living in Las Vegas. And Las Vegas was really one of the kind of ground zero of the like mortgage, credit, housing crisis, right? And I was pretty involved at that point in my church. And I remember talking to an older, wiser guy who'd been around a while, and him saying he was like, "I'm not so worried about the actual financial implications." He said, "You just watch the impact this is going to have on families." He's like, "Just watch 2 or 3 years from now, divorce, suicide, other coping mechanism problems, you know, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, pornography, even like anything to cope." He's like, just watch 2 or 3 years from now. And man, like the stories of sort of families blowing up and he said, and it was the first time I really understood this, was like when you're unable to protect and provide, you know, this deeply, you know, like, and again, whether it's stereotypical or not, and whether it needs to change or not, like it's a whole nother discussion. And I think there's lots of things that need to change about that, but there's still something uniquely ingrained in us, and particularly in this sort of Western, and even more specifically like a Latter-day Saint culture, but even like a Western religious culture. And you can even take religious out of it and just say like a Western. Sure. You know, there's this like hyper individualism. And then you take our political climate, where over the last 15 years, probably we've stripped a lot of the collective responsibility tools away. Like, you know, we used to have like my parents and certainly my grandparents had a pension. Yeah. You know, we removed and I am not arguing whether this is good or bad. I'm just saying it definitely has consequences. Yeah. And, you know, we've moved from collective systems to hyper individual systems. And again, you can make an argument that that's good. It's fine. Right. But it has impact, and the impact is, you know, there's really not really a sense of tribe that, you know, if something went wrong, you're going to be okay, and the, you know, sovereign individual, all that kind of stuff, which has value, and even in our own, you know, in Utah, the hyper focus on industry and preparedness and self-sufficiency, like we have language around all that. Yeah, and then when that's stripped out from under you. You know, emasculating is a really interesting word for that. And so I think it causes, and then let's just, if I can just be really direct, like there's another relationship we have a unique relationship in our culture to success. And we often use the word prosperity, you know, and prospering. And that seems to be uniquely rewarded and amplified in ways that I'm not saying are intentional or evil or anything. I'm just saying it is. And when that amplification of prospering is celebrated and you may not be prospering, you wonder what's wrong with you. And there's not a lot of, and then you don't have anywhere to go to talk about it, right? Because man, the shame around it. And first of all, we don't talk about money, period. And then you add to it men and feelings, right? That general problem. And then you add to it the cultural overlay of, you know, Western pick yourself up by the bootstrap stuff. And then you add to it this new modern phenomenon of, if you're not prospering, your thinking must be wrong. Like there's this new line of thinking around, like you just have to just get your thinking right. You know, then you're like, wow, it's a real cocktail for like, I don't know how to navigate this. So that's, I can't remember exactly what the question was, but that's my rant on that.
Yeah, no, you spoke right to it. It was just around kind of the relationship, I think, of men in our current, you know, culture, society with money. And one of the, I mean, I think you mentioned shame as a part of that, where if it feels like we are not at a certain level of success or prosperity, it is easy to default into that those sort of shame beliefs of like I'm failing, I'm not enough, I'm not capable, etc. And
Yeah.
there was a study around just kind of the increase of male depression, anxiety, loneliness, isolation, all these things that have been really these epidemics, right, in recent years. And one of the studies, I just heard this output from it. Basically, it was like what were kind of the most common themes that came up for the reason for those increasing statistics, and it was that men either feel useless or worthless.
Mm.
This idea of like utility, of like what value am I bringing, which I actually see being connected to worth, right? If I'm not bringing value, if I feel useless, then I am worthless. I think those are very interconnected, but those were kind of the two main
Mm.
takeaways. And I think it's also perpetuated by even outside of maybe Western culture. There is just a general, you know, what social media has done it, with kind of flaunting and showing success, and that's kind of
Mhm.
that's like the idol of the world, is to like be successful, to be wealthy enough to either attract a partner, you know, like that's a big piece, I think, that comes to my mind of money and masculinity. It's like, oh well, if a man is successful, then he's an attractive prospect for a partner, and if he is not, then he's lacking, right, and he's not. There's just lots of messages like this that I
Mhm.
see floating around that can be so damaging, and perpetuating these feelings of either uselessness or of worthlessness. um,
Mm.
so, yeah, and any thoughts on that you'd like to add? I know you're working with a lot of people. I don't know if these are themes that you see that come up, or just other thoughts.
All the time. I
Yeah.
mean, the most common, yeah, all the time.
What do you do to help people that feel like they are failing in terms of finances, money?
Mm.
Uh, Because I bet that I'm willing to bet you've seen people across a really wide spectrum of actual finances,
Yeah,
whether they have, you know, what could be considered an abundance, or a scarcity, but their feelings around it, it could be totally the same, right? Maybe
that's right,
somebody who only has this
that's
much
right,
feels like it's not enough. Someone who has what could be considered an abundance feels like it's not
that's right,
enough.
that's right. Yeah, I was the, leader for our geographical area for our church for a while in Park City,
Hmm.
and in a what I think you could reasonably make the argument at the time was one of the most, maybe outside of maybe there's a Palo Alto ward or a Boston, but, like, one of the wealthiest, and we live on the wrong side of the tracks, like, we're lucky to be here, like, we're not that thing, but to some people, I'm sure we're like, like, there's the problem, right? Like, I just did
Mhm.
exactly what everybody always does. But I remember one of the most common conversations was, like, literal kind of masters of the universe, more money than their grandkids, their great-grandkids, like, airplane money for sure, would come in and say, "I just can't keep up.
Hmm.
I just can't keep up with everybody else in that group."
Yeah.
And I just remember after that conversation so often just being like, "Do you know the person you're pointing to was just in here last week?" You know what I mean? Like, saying the same thing. And I don't I think so, in answer to your question, like, what do you do? I think there's 2 things to do. The first is to get really clear that money won't solve this problem. It doesn't matter, and you pointed to it, it doesn't matter. I have had more conversations with people. It well, I've had conversations with people that their net worth starts with a B, who are the most insecure about their financial situation of anybody I've ever met.
Hmm.
And certainly tens slash hundreds of millions of dollars of net worth. And just went tomorrow's the day, it's all going to go away. If you're, I'm going to just use the word psychotic. If you're psychotic with your relationship with money, more money won't solve that problem.
Yeah.
So that's the step one, is realize that's a job you gave money that money cannot do. There's lots of jobs that we've given money that it can't do. I sometimes, Mike, we do this in some of the retreats or workshops that we do, where we'll have people pretend like money just came in the
like
room.
Personified. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes we'll even get like crisp $100 bills and we'll set them in front of everybody. And we'll say, what's the question you'd like to ask money? Like, if money came in, what would you ask? And it's always super interesting. Like those questions are interesting. But then we'll say, what would money say to you? And one of my version of that, the experience I have with that exercise, is always this picture of like a super earnest but incredibly disappointed golden retriever. You know, like the way in which only a golden retriever could do this. That says like, hey, hey, I tried, right? Like I tried. I just couldn't do it. Right? That job you gave me, that job of happiness, the job of love, the job of security. Man, you have no idea how hard I tried. I just couldn't do it. And that's, to me, that's step number one. Wow. Is getting very clear, like, what jobs have you given money that it cannot do? And it's also fun as part of that process to say, okay, what jobs is money uniquely good at? And you'll get down to things like, it's a medium of exchange, it's a store of value, like the definitions of money. And then the step number two is to define what failure, redefine for yourself. And I think this is a never ending life practice. It's not like you're going to solve this overnight, but redefine for yourself what success and failure mean. Because the question is like, how do you deal with people who feel like a failure? And then that shame that comes, it's like, well, who said you were a failure? Where did that come from? Yeah. And then if you define it for yourself and realize that feeling you're having about failure is actually, money will not solve that. That's a different type of work that needs to be engaged in, right? Which I pointed to earlier. It just took us moving all the way to New Zealand for me to figure that out. But I didn't go over there and make a bunch of money and feel better about my relationship with money. I went over there and figured out, oh my gosh, this isn't about money at all. It's about my core identity, who I believe I am, what my relationship to God is. Like, and so once because if we attach our identity and our self-worth to our net worth, that's a recipe for disaster. So I think number one, realize that's a job money can't do. Number two, redefine for yourself your personal definition of failure and success. And one thing that's helpful, I'll just mention one last thing, is one of the reasons we're having such a problem with this is our circle of our comparison set has gotten out of whack. Yeah. Right? Like it used to be, I grew up in Park City when I was young. Like I remember when I was 6 and 7, I wanted a slightly better BMX bike because all my buddies we all had BMX bikes, and some had better and some had worse. And I just wanted, oh man, that's kind of cool. That Diamondback's kind of cool. That red line's kind of cool. I didn't know that I was supposed to want a private jet. Right. And now I do. And the secondary problem with that is, because of Instagram, like we don't even know if the person who we're comparing ourselves to even has the thing. Yeah. And that's a secondary order problem. It doesn't really even matter whether they have it or not, but most of the time they don't even have it. Most of the time it's just garbage. So that's the third thing you can do to get clear about defining is like, I call it cultivating your comparison set. Be really careful about what's getting into your life that's causing you to feel that way. And then to the degree that you can, rewire the stimulus response thing, but to the degree you can, get rid of the stimulus. Like I can't remember the last time I was on Instagram. I literally can't remember. I mean, it's certainly been a very long time. But there's other things that cause me problem. Amazon book rankings, like my book. I look at that too often. So anyway, that's some ideas.
Yeah. Wow. No, so much there. Thank you. a question that I think may be related and tied to what we've been talking about, and as a question that I love the way that you've asked it to some of your guests and explored this, is this idea of what is enough?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is just
Yeah.
that's a rabbit hole, but I would love to see where you go with that. What is
My
enough?
yeah, my favorite response to that was Krista Tippett's. She
Mm.
she invoked Rilke's Letters to a Young Poet. She said, "Man, that's a question I'm just going to live with for a year."
Yeah, yeah,
I really like that. My take on enough is that it can't be a number,
yeah.
because if it's a number, I promise you'll never get there. Because the moment you get close, you'll move it. And the research on this is pretty clear. Like, everybody who's ever asked, what is enough, it's almost always just a little bit more than what you have. And so it can't be a number. I don't think it can be a destination. I think it's something you have to be,
Mhm.
right? Like, you have to become enough. And again, that points to the fact that it's just a different type of work.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I mean, we have a lot in our like wisdom tradition around like the idea of sufficient for my needs.
Mhm.
And it's so interesting. Somebody actually pointed to the idea that, it was Hugh Nibley pointed to the idea that money may be and there are some places where this might be pointed out, like money may be the crux of the entire test, like how you handle money, because it's just a metaphor
Mm.
for power and authority. And so, is the appropriate answer, well, I have enough. Okay, well, what does that mean? Is enough a $150,000 wake surfing boat? Maybe, right? Like, maybe it is. Like, and that's the thing. That's the thing so beautiful is we all want so badly some set of criteria, that this is enough. Or, yes, if you have X, spending $150,000 on a wake surfing boat's fine. Right? Like, but those things don't exist. And so we're left
Yeah.
to navigate that relationship on our own. And what's enough for me is definitely not going to be, it might be something somebody else can only dream of. And it might be there's another person out there that thinks, what I have enough. Somebody called our house once quaint, this cute little quaint house, because they lived in a 15,000 square foot place up in the canyon. And I
Right.
was like, isn't that interesting? Like, because
Right.
there's somebody
The
else
relativity.
so it's all relative. So I don't know what enough is. I just know it's and we should just be gracious and patient and generous with ourselves. And
Mhm.
it's a super fruitful place to explore.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. There was a friend of mine, a teacher, who just brought this new perspective to me about gratitude. And it might sound a little bit like shaming at first. I don't think it is, or that's not the intention, but it's the question to explore is, what do I feel entitled to?
That's a
And
good one.
entitlement is like a loaded word, right? But if
Yeah.
we just looked at it pretty objectively and just took away any sort of judgments or shame or anything and just say, what do I actually feel entitled to? And then root
Mm.
out that entitlement, because pretty quickly as we start digging in and go, oh, do I feel entitled to my health? Do I feel entitled to my home? Do I feel entitled to my bank account? Do I feel entitled even to my next breath? And then we realize it's all a gift. And just that
Yeah.
humbling,
Yeah.
then that rush of gratitude comes in for just this next breath. Like, what a perspective shift. And somehow that's connecting in my mind to this idea of enough. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I was just, as you were talking, I was thinking about what is is there anything I feel entitled to? And I got to one thing that I feel like I could defend, and that is
mhm.
like God's love,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
But that's the only thing that sits under all of it,
Mhm.
is a connection to the divine
Yeah.
and that I'm already, like, that's the back to enough. Like, I am already enough and have always been. And it's like, this is what's so hard for so many of us in any culture, and particularly in our culture. It's so hard to hold two competing truths. Like, I am already enough and I can improve.
Yeah.
And like, I think about this with my relationship with my wife. Like, my relationship with my wife has never ever been better. Like, never ever. It's amazing. I couldn't have ever dreamed. I think about it almost every day in the morning. I'm just like, I can't believe. And it's like dot dot dot. And man, I'm gonna strive to make it better tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right. And the same with my kids. Like, my relationship with my adult kids is as good as I could have ever dreamed. And I sure hope it's better tomorrow. And I don't want the day to come where I like, it's enough. But it already is enough. So it's
right.
like you can hold those things true. And the one thing that sits at the bottom of all that is a relationship to the divine that has told me and everyone else, you already are there. You're already enough. The kingdom of heaven's already here. Right? Like, that level of thing. And I think if you can get to that foundation around money and say, okay, well, what else matters? Then you can be slightly more playful with the practice of figuring out what's failure, what's success. And like, oh, and I find myself all the time, like, and just yesterday, I was so bummed at myself for getting a little hijacked again, around a metric that nobody else even knows or cares about. And I built this whole story around it, and then was like, oh my gosh, you just spent 3 hours hijacked. And I can be a little playful about it now. And I can say to my kids when that happens now, I can say, hey, what you just saw, I've had this conversation more times than I care to admit, but with my adult kids, I've been fond lately of, especially around money, if I get upset or angry or impatient with them about some question around finances or how they're treating something or whether they are demonstrating appropriate stewardship. Like, I have found myself saying more and more lately, like, hey, you know what you just witnessed was a dad who doesn't know what he's doing. Like, dad, like, you're just watching a guy who's called a dad who doesn't know what he's doing. Nobody taught me how to do this stuff. Can we learn together? Like, hey, can you muster up one more forgiveness, and I promise I'll ask you for more. And that relationship always deepened my relationship with my kids, but particularly around money, just like, I don't know, but what you just saw was not it. Right. Yeah. And then I can get back to love and be like, but I do love you, and I know God loves both of us, and we're going to be okay, whatever that means.
Oh, I love that you brought that up. Thank you. And that's such a powerful insight that has changed my life as a dad too. I heard it said in this way: I can't show my kids how to be perfect, but I can show them how to repair and repent.
Right? I told my wife, I was like, after making the same mistake again for the 100th time with one of my kids, and they stomped off, I looked over and I was like, at least we get another shot at apologizing. Like, at least I can, like, I'm going to teach them one skill. It's going to be how to apologize.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's beautiful. Awesome. Okay, you have mentioned a couple of times this experience that sounded really pivotal for you, and it was when you moved overseas for a while in New Zealand. Is there anything any more to that story, that because you've alluded to it a couple of times? Is that a story you'd be willing to share a little bit more detail around?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of what would be most useful. I went kicking and screaming, like, it was and I consider myself we spend a lot of time in the mountains, and like, adventure is a huge piece of my life. And so the fact that I was so resistant is always surprising to me. This was my wife's idea. Something changed we were renting our house, and the landlord who was super nice, and we'd basically stopped signing leases even, and they were just like, don't even worry about it. I mean, we were paying rent, but they're like, we don't need to sign. And then after one of those conversations, just a couple months later, they called and said, hey, we're getting divorced. We've got to sell the house in 90 days. And so it was a pretty big shock. And we had wanted to move overseas. We had tried other times and it just never worked. Largely because I would sabotage it, because I was just like, who does this? You know what I mean? Like, I can't afford it. I didn't even have a passport when I was a kid. So this happened, and really quickly my wife was like, hey, what if we looked overseas? And then that night she was at a gathering with some friends, and she mentioned like, hey, we're kind of exploring the idea of moving over. Nobody had ever said the words New Zealand. Like, we'd never thought about New Zealand. I mean, if you'd asked me 10 places I wanted to move, I probably, since high school, I might have said New Zealand, but I probably just because like it seems cool, right? Somebody at this event told my wife, like, you should go to New Zealand. We have a house and a car and sea kayaks, and you guys could just go over.
Wow.
And 10 days later, we had plane tickets. That phone call of we have to sell the house to the time we left was, I think, 90 days.
Wow. And
we had kids, you know, we had one daughter getting ready to leave to Italy on a mission. We had another daughter getting ready to go into her senior year in high school. And to all of their credit, they were like, yeah, I mean, I think they said, let's go. I think maybe a little bit like with trepidation, but they all went. So that's how we ended up over there. And we ended up, long story short, but anyway, we ended up over there, and the whole time I was just like, why are we doing this? This is crazy. 1 year. And then woke up over there, and it was really, my wife got in an accident climbing down a Mount Cook while I was in India speaking for work. And I got a call at 4 a.m. India time. We had just woken up. I'd finished all my work, and we were in Varanasi, and we were going to go see that whole experience of the funeral pyres in Varanasi. And I mean, right there on the river, and it was just pilgrims everywhere. And you dump coconut water on Shiva. Like, there's all this stuff going on. And I get this call at 5 a.m, which was my son saying, hey, he said something like, don't freak out, but mom was in an accident. He said something like, she may not live, right?
Ooh.
And I was in deep rural India. There's no way to get home. There was no way to speed up the process. Like, the soonest flight was 2 o'clock. It's 5 a.m. So I went. I was like, there's nothing else to do. I mean, I finally got a hold of the search and rescue team, and they were like, no, she's going to live. We don't know if she'll walk, but she's going to live. Wow. She's okay. And we've got your kids. And it was 2 helicopter flights, and the search and rescue team drove my kids to the hospital 3 hours away. Like, just a classic New Zealand story, though. Like, people just so good. And so I go to this ceremony, like, and the sadhus dancing around and smoke, and it's early. It felt like I was in it would have felt like I was in a dream anyway, but it felt even further. Anyway, I find my way home. I get home, and she walks out of the hospital 2 days later. Oh wow. Pretty messed up, but able to walk. And that started a rehab thing. And what the reason for that story is, the guy that helped us with her, like the strength coach that helped us with rehab, his name's Glenn, and he's like one of our favorite people in the world now. But I was going with my wife, and he was like, bro, you are a mess. Like, functional. Like, I was like, no, she's the one. He's like, I know, but you're a mess functionally. And I always considered myself an endurance athlete. And that really woke me up to like, wow, I'm really broken. And then that started breaking open the argumentative things, and the money would set me off. And so then that experience, and there's something really powerful about land for me, like desert sagebrush, like the smell of it, the Wasatch Mountains, the Pfefferhorn. Like, I've had some of my most religious spiritual experiences, and New Zealand has become, so I just spent a lot of time just walking through forests or paddling a sea kayak and just trying to unwind and unwind and unwind and unwind. And the land seemed to just take it all, and it would take as much as I could. I just remember the feeling of like we did a lot of whitewater kayaking and pack rafting on these just ridiculously beautiful rivers. And I just remember the feeling over and over and over that the river would be like, I can take it. Give me more. What else you got? Like, come on, don't hold back. And that just went on for 4 years. And then and then the other thing that we learned there that I think is important is in this, and I'm not saying this is bad or good, by the way. I have an opinion about it, but I'm not expressing that opinion in the story. You'd come back to the States, and I would only describe it, I could feel the static in the air. Like I literally could feel the static. And the way my friend described it was, there are cultures all around the world, different countries and they all are like an equalizer. And hopefully your whole audience knows what an equalizer is, but some people don't, right? Where you could tune the bass and the treble and all different things, you could tune it. And some cultures are tuned to, like if I asked you what Italy was tuned to, you'd have a sense, like maybe it's wine and football. And maybe if you said France, you'd have a sense. And if you said New Zealand, you'd probably say holiday and the beach and family and time outside. And then when you get to the States, my friend was like, it's like the States is hard because you can't tell how the equalizer is tuned because the volume is so damn loud. And the volume is money. The volume is money and work. And I really started to see that, like, work's become the organizing and again, I'm not actually saying whether that's bad or good. Just saying work has become the organizing principle of our lives. Like I'll fit the kids in.
Right.
I'll fit sleep in. I mean, how many times have I heard local entrepreneurial talks where people are like, oh yeah, just grind 80 hours. Like I'll fit sleep in. And maybe that's good. Maybe that gets us innovation that we couldn't get any other way. I don't know. I just know that I don't think we're going to wake up proverbially at the end of our lives and be happy with the idea that we fit the kids in when we could, and that we fit our health in when we could, and that we fit our community in and our even deeper, like we fit our close friends and family in just when we had time. Right? I don't think that's what any of the wisdom traditions point to. And I think Jesus particularly was really clear about it, just dripping with sarcasm. Like how many of you are going to build a barn, fill it up and then build another?
Yeah.
And we're all busy building barns.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that really was impactful from New Zealand was like, it turns out you don't have to. I remember asking people, like, as soon as I'd meet them, I'd be like, what do you do for a living? And after like 10 of those, one of my friends that was often introducing me pulled me aside and was like, bro, we don't say that here. He's like, ask them what they did this weekend. Ask them how their family is. Ask them where their next holiday is. I was like, wow. So these are little nuanced, slippery little things that like you don't really kind of know it until, last thing, like the old Zen proverb of the old fish swimming up to the young fish saying, hey boys, how's the water? And the young fish saying, what water? Well, I think that's what it is. It's not like intentional. It's not malicious. It's just we don't realize the water we're swimming in.
So powerful. That question, we've talked about that in our brotherhood at various times of how much of a default it is to ask, what do you do? Yeah. And then we just immediately make assumptions and judgments about each other based on the answer, right? And like, and we continue in that perpetual state of sort of measuring our worth based on our work or on our net worth. And it's so unfortunate that like, I wish we had different words for those things, net worth and worth of the soul, right? Like we call both those things worth, and it's so easily amazing. Tied up. Yeah.
I think that like worth thing, your value.
Yeah. Like what value do you bring or offer?
So loaded.
Yes. No, I love the way you spoke to all of this and getting to our definitions of success, getting to the one thing that I agree that I think can feel entitled to, which is love of God, love from God.
Mhm.
Is powerful. I actually wanted to just share with you an insight that came to me from listening to the questions you ask.
Mm. Mm.
You asked about the earliest memory with money, and I immediately had a memory. The first one was just having a dollar in a little pharmacy store that had a bunch of candy in the back aisle, and it was like, what, how far can I stretch this dollar to get as much of these goodies and the right kind of combination
How
of
old were you?
treats? Oh, I was, I don't know, maybe like 8, something like
Wow.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, it was probably, my mom or somebody, like, gave me a dollar and said, "Okay, you can get a candy with this dollar." And so I'm
Yeah.
looking at, okay, how much do these cost and how much does that cost? And if I add those up, right, I'm, like, calculating how I can, like, maximize the benefit of that dollar, right?
Right.
So that was a memory that came to mind, and it meant it was kind of fun, but it also I felt kind of like I have to get this. I have to like figure this out. Like I have to
Yeah.
get this right. I want to get the most out of this that I can. So that
Let
that
me
was
just
one.
pause you real quick, because
Yeah.
if we had time, and I think this is just beneficial for people listening, like, if we had time,
Yeah.
it's all I can do to not ask you about the word maximizing
Yep. Yep.
and about stretch. Like, those
Yep.
2 words are so interesting, and I just think as your listeners try to engage in conversations like this around money, just be on the lookout for I call them the crunchy bits.
Hmm.
Like the words and you'll hear words like, shame or blame or
Yep.
nervous or worried or lack. I was having this conversation with
Hmm.
somebody the other day that used the word lack, and I was like, oh my gosh, dude. But maximize is super interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
commentary
Okay.
over. Keep going with the story.
No. Yeah. No. There's a lot we could dig into there. The second story that came to mind was I had an older sister who, one time she had a bunch of pennies and I had some dimes. And I don't remember how old I was, little though, maybe like 6 or something. I don't know, right? Um, she convinced me that we should trade because the penny looked like it was gold and it was bigger. And so it looked like it was worth more. And
Yeah,
so I'm going, oh, this is a sweet deal. I'm giving away these little silver dimes because
right,
silver's not as good as gold, right?
right,
Like it's not as
right.
valuable. So I'm trading her dimes for pennies. And I have no idea what's going on. Just naive, trusting.
Well, have
And
you
then I
talked to
find
people
out,
about that?
no, I haven't actually.
That'd be such a fascinating conversation.
Yeah, no, I remember finding out that I had been duped and just the total, feeling of betrayal, embarrassment. I felt ashamed,
Yeah,
that I
yeah,
didn't know better. I felt taken
yeah.
advantage of. And
Man, that's like just a
that
list of words.
yes, no, and that has showed up for me in even,
Sure.
years beyond. And I
Yeah,
actually remember just one connected story that is just funny to me now. I bought some tickets to a Broadway show on Times Square from one of these guys that's just out there,
right,
like,
right.
selling tickets. And, turns out it was a valid ticket, but it wasn't what he said it was, right?
Yeah,
He was like, front row seat, blah, blah, blah. And I marched back there and found him and started yelling at him like this
yeah,
was
yeah,
bold. I was like, "You ripped me off!" Da, da, da. And he's trying to get his slimy friend to be like, "No, you got a great deal." Da, da, da. They're trying to convince me that like it was
yeah,
all good, and I just refused. And I was like, I just felt like I was speaking up in a way for that, like,
right,
that
right,
part of me that felt like I was betrayed and taken advantage of. I was like, no, like it was this crazy. I mean, probably an overreaction, right? But I was loud
sure,
enough and affecting the people that were, and this is very out of character for me, by the way. People that know
yeah,
me would be like, I can't imagine you like yelling at some guy in
yeah,
Times Square,
yeah,
and maybe I wasn't like screaming, but I was raising my voice. There was a
yeah,
fire in my eyes, and so
yeah,
he actually refunded me and took the ticket back,
wow,
which was like wild that even happened, right?
yeah. Yeah, but it's so interesting to, like, see, because what normally I would say 95% of our lives, and I think again, I don't know if this is equal for men or women, but I just can speak uniquely from a male perspective because that's the only perspective I have, is 95% of what I see in men's behavior around money is just automatic. Like you didn't, and what's that great? Is it, I can't remember who, oh man, it's I think it's a Nietzsche quote that like, until we make the subconscious conscious, we will, it will
direct our
lives.
It will direct our lives. We'll call it fate. That's Carl Jung. Yes.
Yeah, Jung. That's right. Same thing, right? Like that idea of, I know that's not the same thing. I don't need any emails about that. But the idea of like, guy ripped me off, I'm going to tear into him. Just being like, dun, dun. And then suddenly you're like, oh, it's so interesting. If we can just pause long enough to go, and man, here, like my wife would laugh so hard if she heard me saying this, because it's like, I'm so bad at it.
Right.
But we just catch ourselves being hijacked and sort of just be like, I love the idea of just looking over there and being like, whoa, check that out. Oh, and I love the phrase, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting how Mike's behaving right now with that guy?
Yeah.
And part of that probably was important and like the guy needed the lesson and all that's fine. But you're pointing to there was this little bit of an edge where you're like, I'm not sure. I just think if we can get to the point where we're like, go back to the person who we're engaged with, especially if it's our spouse, and say, man, I don't want to not take responsibility, but I take responsibility. And would you mind talking about it a little bit? Because I don't know what went on there. Can we unpack it a bit?
Totally.
Like,
yes.
Because it's just boom, boom. And money is wired that way. And we've never had a chance to talk about it. Nobody's ever given us a place to talk about it. So yeah, those are super good stories.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate taking a little extra time to share that. And really appreciate you taking the time to be on the podcast. If you had just any final thought or a word of advice, you've already shared so many good things, but if there's any last thoughts you had, and I'm particularly thinking of, there are a lot of guys in our community who have had struggles with unemployment, underemployment, maybe feeling that sense of lack or scarcity or not enoughness in terms of being able to provide or to, feel like they're successful. And I could say just re-listen to this whole episode and you'll get everything you needed to hear on that. But if you did have any last thoughts on that, I just wanted to give you that opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. Just an observation that one thing I think is important to understand is that there's a reason that feeling is becoming more prevalent. It's not because you're broken or your thinking is wrong or you're not spiritual enough or you weren't obedient enough. There are some structural changes that are happening and have been happening for the last 10 years and have accelerated over the last 3 or 4 years. There are some structural changes to why you're feeling that way. And I think that's really important to understand, that it's not just pull yourself up by the bootstraps. We might get there eventually anyway, because in the end, we still have to accept responsibility and figure out how to deal with it. But I think it's really important to acknowledge, like, here's the story for that. Our first home was in the 15th and 15th area of Salt Lake, like beautiful walkable area right there by Einstein's Bagels. Like, we loved it. That was our first home, and we could only afford it because we remodeled the basement and rented the basement out. And so with that income from the basement, I went back and looked at my tax returns back then, including the income from the basement. We were something like the 50th percentile of income earners in the county, including the rental income. That was enough to afford that house. It's the same house. Nothing's changed about the house. Nobody's done a thing to the house. I now know what the house is worth now. So it's pretty easy to know. And you now need to be in the top 5% of all income earners to afford that house. Same house. And like, that's just if you're feeling like things are running away from you, getting out of reach, the underemployment problem, structural changes are occurring, that I think that's first important to just recognize that and give yourself a little bit of grace. And like, you can have it's okay to have a little bit of even a pity party for that. Like, We can mourn the loss. We can be pissed about it. Like we can go in the backyard and throw stuff appropriately, right? Like get that out. There's a reason. There's a reason we have. I think if we don't process that anger, then we end up with all sorts of other problems. So you find appropriate ways to process that, and then you wake up and say, okay, what do we do? And there's going to be some levels of creativity. There might be major changes that need to be made. There's like, I was just talking to a friend who bought a house for $200,000 in Cleveland, Ohio, in a neighborhood that like he likes the people there. And I'm not suggesting anybody move to Cleveland. I'm simply saying once we've appropriately processed some of the anger that we feel, because we feel like the rug, particularly men in the West, like you feel like the rug's just been pulled out from under. There's this expectation of a predictable path of progress.
Mm-hmm.
Our parents had it,
mm-hmm.
certainly, but our grandparents absolutely had it. You graduate from college, you get a job, you work for 30 years, you have a pension, you have a picket fence, right? Like buy a house, like all that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's changed. It's not coming back. Like I think we have to mourn the loss. That's not, I actually think it was an aberration anyway. And there's lots of structural reasons for that aberration. And we might even like, I think it was an aberration anyway. It was never that way before that period.
Yeah, right.
50 years. And it certainly hasn't been said. So let's just process that.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't political in any way. It's not, it's like, and let's say, okay, now, okay, what do we do? Right. And then we can go back to the last, like, let's redefine success. Let's redefine failure. Let's get clear about it for ourselves. Let's make a plan. Some of the things that worked in the past don't work anymore. And then know, like, you're not alone. That your worth is driven by you're already enough. And geez, Mike, I don't get a chance to express this out loud very often, but I'm going to just take one more minute.
Please do. There's
a unique challenge you may have bumped up against. Like I really found this interesting. I heard Brene Brown talk about this. She said she was at a book signing once. It was almost all women at her book signing. And she could see this guy in the line in his 50s or mid 50s, slightly shifting, like kind of a little uncomfortable, making his way up the line as the book signing. And as he got closer and closer, he's like, when are you ever going to write a book for men? And she's like, I don't understand. Like, this isn't like, it's not for men or women. He's like, yeah. I'm paraphrasing here, but he said something like, do you understand the problem? Everybody's saying that we should be more vulnerable and more authentic. But he's like, the moment we do, like, there's no room for it. Like, you don't actually want us to get off the white horse. It's this guy's approach. And I was like, that's so weird. And then I was like, actually, we need to rework that.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because I found that to be true. My wife and I've talked a lot about that, of like, do you really actually want me to be anything but hypervigilant, strong, and protective?
Right.
Because the moment I do, there's no container for it. Well, why is there no container for it? Nobody taught us how to do it. Like, nobody taught my daughter in her second year in med school. Nobody taught whoever she's going to marry someday how to have very few people were taught how to have a female spouse, a wife, in med school, and what it means to show up at parties and everybody wants to talk to her about her career and isn't talking to you. You know what I mean? Like, and again, no, I'm not saying feel sorry. I'm saying to you and I, that's all the terrain we're navigating. And a lot of it comes down to the value we placed on money. And can we just be more patient, kind, give each other permission to be clumsy, because we don't know. And I think that's not advice, it's an observation of I'm still struggling with it too. And I just think the only option I'm not comfortable with is giving up on it. Right? Because my wife and I, one time, I was like, yeah, we could end these arguments we have about money really easily. We just call it quits. Right? Or we're going to just keep trying again. Just keep trying again. Keep trying again. So thanks for that, Mike.
No, thank you. I appreciate it so much. Love this conversation. We'll put in the notes all the links to everything that you're doing, so everyone can follow along. And I've just loved hearing, like I mentioned at the beginning, the podcast and the work that you're doing, and I'm grateful for it. And as you've mentioned, money is one of those topics that we haven't become comfortable with talking about, and yet it is so important. It's such an important part of our mental wellness, I think our holistic wellness. So thank you for the voice you bring to this space and the work you're doing.
Cheers, Mike. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe or leave a review to help spread the word, and check out our website and socials for upcoming retreats and events.